Kevin, and of course to Richard, being the sponsor of this working group. So what we are going to talk about in this presentation is first to have a quick overlook of what is the current status of risk management. Then we're gonna go and see the new trends, what is now happening in the construction industry. We've seen part of those new trends in Guido's previous presentation, so we're gonna come back maybe to some of the elements. And then we're going to talk about the insurance applicability of what we call smart risk management. And I'm sure that there could be a question, smart risk management, it's not in opposition to what was being done so far. So it was a smart, but just to use a new technological word. And then our recommendation for maybe a new risk management code of practice. Just small pictures, a funny one to show what is really happening in the construction industry. So we could see it whether happening on the very high-rise buildings, on the small type of construction. We see that there is always a curious situation where people could put themselves at risk. And risk management, this is the whole purpose of the risk management, is to make sure that we do not expose people at risk, but also we're talking about material damage that is very important from an insurance point of view. So if we come to the basics about what is risk management, obviously it is the identification, evaluation, prioritization of risks, followed of course by a coordinated and economical application of the resources. To do what? To minimize, monitor, and control the probability or impact of unfortunate events and maximize the realization of opportunities. So the standard process is about identifying, assessing, and then we determine what is the most appropriate strategy once those risks were assessed and identified. Should be how to avoid the risk, how to transfer the risk, whether to transfer it to insurance or to transfer it to a different player, a different owner of the risk, how to mitigate, and finally maybe how to accept this risk. The whole thing should be done and executed into a risk management plan, what we call often a risk register. And then what is important is to monitor those risks and enhance and keep on, feeding this risk management plan. So it's not something that is sterile, it's something that needs to be updated constantly. And of course, there are many publications about this that we've seen about risk management for dummies, but also there have been many working groups, whether at EMEA, at LEG, different associations talking about risk management. So we're not going to go through the details of all of this, but this is a topic that have been discussed over and over. And in our paper, we did not want to talk from the very beginning about risk management, but more to focus about the new changes and the new trends. So we've seen that the current model as it is today has several limitations. The first one is that, and this is the experience that we shared all together from whether underwriters, risk engineers in the group, in the working group, or brokers, is that the first thing we encounter is the difficulties to engage with the project. So one of the main issues is to have the project management on board and to acknowledge the risk of catastrophic events. Because often when we talk to people on construction site, they have their own risk register, they have their own concerns, mainly about delay, about quality, about money, but rarely about material damage, and even less when it comes to catastrophic events. They usually a contractor would look at the would look at the probability of the event, and for them, catastrophic events being having a very low probability are not on the top of their list. Fair enough, but then it's for us, engineers and underwriters and risk managers, to help them to raise awareness about those catastrophic events. Another limitation we found about the current model is the risk engineers selection as such. So because we all have in our companies different expertise, but we do not always, we have seen that not always the most qualified person for the job is chosen. And also with the language and communication difficulties, it could be a difficult task to engage with the project. So this is another important matter to take into consideration. The third point that was paramount is about the engineering fees. So we all, as underwriters, have the habit of putting a 2.5% as incurred fees or something like that. But we see that this value or this engineering fees pot is not sufficient when it comes to small projects. On the big projects, we can do many things, but on the smaller ones, the 2.5% out of the premium is not always enough. However, this should not be a deal breaker, or this should not prevent us from putting forward a robust risk management plan. The whole thing is to put a tailor-made plan, and if this requires a larger fees than the 2.5%, then it should be proposed and it should be accepted by the co-insurance or the co-reinsurance, subject, of course, to the implementation of the plan. So the idea here is to not only to focus about the 2.5 limitation in the budget, but to put forward a more realistic budget, because big losses could be avoided with an appropriate and a proper risk management plan. And finally, we have also seen that what we do in the current risk surveys do not always cover topics such as quality control, defects, and faulty workmanship, particularly when it comes to offsite prefabrication. In the construction nowadays, there are more and more of offsite prefabricated elements, modular construction in different sites around the world, and then being assembled on site. We do not always pay attention to what's happening outside the construction site when it comes to the surveys. And so this is another point, another major point to take care of and to put it into the risk management plan. So what we are looking at us as insurers, and which is different to the contractors, our project manager, is those black swan events, because they do exist. And this is what we always try to remind the people on site. And we need to avoid getting to the losses in the end, even though the probability could be very low. Now, if you look about what is happening in the construction industry, just a small thing, if you got any questions, please put them in writing. In the end, I'm sure we're going to have time to answer them. So here I wanted to share with you some of the information that are public actually in many of the McKinsey reports about the infrastructure industry. And to say, of course, we all know construction matters for the world economy. It represents a big share, a big chunk of the world's GDP. It's a major catalyst for the for any economic plan, that particularly now in the pandemic also crisis. However, what we have seen and what was seen in the construction industry is that compared to most of the other industries, the total economy overall, or manufacturing, or any industry, is that there was not an improvement in the productivity of construction. And this is very important. It means that we are losing money in a way for the same dollar compared to the other industries. And this puts stress on the industry to try to evolve and to make different propositions. So this is another chart showing about USA productivity in construction compared to different industries, whether retail, agriculture, manufacturing, mining. The message is that we are not gaining in productivity, and so there are things that needs to be done. So the construction industry must evolve to gain productivity and efficiency. This means a new ecosystem for the construction, new processes and new tools, and thus for us, a new approach in risk management. I'm going to go quickly onto those 7 ways, but just to this is also an interesting finding we found in the latest McKinsey report, thinking about what are the 7 ways to improve productivity. We see about regulation, of course, about contractual framework, about rethinking the design process, improving supply chain, site execution, digitalization, and the organization of workforce. And we're going to see how this can be translated into a new construction ecosystem. So currently what is happening is that if we have several projects, project 1, 2, 3, 4, for example, we're going to see each project being dealt with on independently. So there is the development, the design, the supply of materials, the distribution on site, starting the construction, and then the final building as such of a project. And this happens independently for each project. So project 1 and project 3, they are completely independent one from the other. But if we need to gain productivity, and this is what happened in lots of other industries, in manufacturing, in retail, we have to think, I mean, construction industry is thinking kind of Amazon style approach. So we need a more consolidated and integrated construction process. This means also a shift in the contractual framework between the owners and the contractors, but also it means a shift in the framework and our approach as insurers of how insurance would apply for different type of projects and not only for one single project. So the idea is to try to consolidate the different steps of a construction, and we see if there could be, I mean, optimization when we could do the development of several projects at the same time, or when we can do the offsite manufacturing and prefabrication for different projects at the same time, and then being shifted and being sent to different construction sites. This would definitely increase productivity and efficiency in the construction site, but then it's for us as insurers to try to integrate this into our insurance policies. We've seen, of course, modular and 3D construction being more and more generalized. And not only about modular construction, but we hear a lot the terminology of building smarter, and building smarter with the help of machines, i.e., artificial intelligence. Small, just a chart here to give you an idea of the venture capital investments in the US construction and building technology startups. So it's not just any startups, but it's the construction tech startups, to show you how much is being invested into those startups. So we can see it's more than 2 billion, for example, for the last year, and number of deals being varying a lot. We've seen number of deals less, which means that more money being focused into bigger players. They sell startups, but bigger players. So there is a big move on the construction tech startups, and it means that soon there will be consequences on construction sites, whether in the digitalization, and this is we're seeing a lot, or whether with the organization of the site as such. And artificial intelligence can also be used and is actually being used in other parts of the constructions. Here particularly, we gave the example of project management. And we've seen many companies. So IBM is developing it a lot with Dr. Watson in medicine, but now in construction as well. They have a partnership with Fluor, and then there are many small startups that we know of and we are working with as well, that work on artificial intelligence on different levels. So there's lots of assistance being done on project management. Why is that? Because in construction companies, there's a big gap in generations, and of course, there's difficulties in transmitting the knowledge from the most experienced project managers to the new project manager coming on site. When us underwriters, we evaluate, we assess a risk or we assess a project, we talk a lot about the experience of the people. Do they have experience into this particular type of risk, tunneling, bridges, what works, etc. And it's very difficult to put the most experienced people everywhere. And so that's why there are now new technologies that are being developed to accompany and to assist new project managers by integrating the previous experiences. So it's a kind of softwares that allow to read all what has been done in the previous projects and then make suggestions. So when it comes to analytics, to predictive analysis of the resources, of the critical path. So these are all elements that that would help to reduce the risk of when it comes, of course, from a contractor's point of view, cost and delay and quality, but then it means also for us, for insurance, if it's better quality, if it's a less steep critical path, it means maybe more chances for the project. So we have lots of technologies. We try to develop them in the paper as well. Different tools. I'm not going to go through all of them because it will take too much time. But particularly what we see, what you have seen a lot is the BIM models and the digital twins. Digital twins with BIM being very important because it could help do kind of rehearsal of the construction of a project, particularly when we have different parties, different contractors working on the same site. So it allows them to make sure that the different elements, they fit well all together. Not only this, but also the construction of the project as such. And then this is very important for modular building and for prefabricated also elements, because in this case heavy lifts can be simulated and many errors could be avoided, and thus it means less risk on site. Sensors have been developed widely, the usage of drones and robotics as well. So what does this mean from an insurance perspective, and particularly when it comes to risk management? We have seen so many sensors being developed, and particularly when it comes to fire prevention and fire safety, this is being widely used. And much more than simple fire alarms or network of alarms on construction sites. I'm not talking about the permanent ones, but about the temporary ones. This is very important. We have seen also lots of devices like thermal cameras allowing to detect any particular hot points, whether for electrical panels, but also it works as well for hot works. So on the hot works, for example, on welding, we've seen many losses, and I think we all have a bad experience about this. Now with thermal cameras, we can extend the watching period, for example, for when it comes to hot works, and when it's connected to an alarm system, it could help avoid a serious fire. But also those devices have been developed for water damage. So when it comes to the testing of the pipes, when it comes to tunnel safety or third-party exposure, there are lots of devices that are being used, from the simple laser, I would say, equipment to the satellite imagery at real time. And then, of course, with the drones that are being used for risk surveying and progress overviews. This is in different scenarios. So it could be when the site is not easily accessible. It could be for long infrastructure type of structures. If we are building a railroad network, for example, or a highway, instead of just visiting a small sample of the site, we can have a survey all through the project as well. And obviously, with the COVID and pandemic crisis, this could be also an alternative way to to access sites. However, with this, we get new challenges that are arising. How can we use risk management new techniques and devices, and how can we build this into the policy wordings? Do we need to have warranties, for example, in our policy wordings when it comes to usage of a kind of sensors, or usage of a kind of digital technology? Sometimes it's in the policies, but sometimes we can put it, or what personally I try to do as well, is to put this proposition into a risk management proposition plan that could accompany the proposed terms and conditions. So it shows the client what we need to do and what is our intention as well. Do these new techniques introduce new vulnerabilities? So we have, of course, the cyber risk that could be greater. We have also maybe new mistakes because people are not familiar with the usage of this technology. And so we have these are also a new type of errors and man errors that can be seen as well. But does this mean that we will have less people and more technology? And because the role of people will still be very important. So what we understood from different discussions is that technology is more to assist people rather than to replace the people. And then, of course, one major question is about the defects and is the new technology susceptible to failures and defects, which is normal, and this could happen, of course. But then how we deal with this when it comes to, for example, offsite modular prefabrication on large scale, and if we detect an error when already, hundreds of the element is already being produced. So our recommendations to this. One thing that is for sure is that construction industry is now evolving quickly, and insurance should partner with the industry. This is important. We should not be behind the construction industry. We should talk with our clients and make sure that we do this development with them. And a risk management plan should always be bespoke. There's not one solution that fits for all. So every project in every location with the different parties involved should have its own merit and its own risk management plan. So this includes the best qualified engineers for the mission, and engineering fees must not be a deal breaker because much is at stake if no plan is implemented. Unfortunately, we have seen that sometimes risk surveys are not being conducted because of the engineering fees, and this is something we should collectively try to avoid. So like we said, we've seen new tools, new technologies, new processes, but also new challenges. And an interesting question we had is that would the faulty workmanship becomes faulty machineship in a way? And at which level the design defect is to be considered? Is it at the programming level? Is it at the design? Is it at the programming of the machine? So these are all questions that need to be discussed in more details, and unfortunately we could not go into that depth. And what specific exclusions do we need, or maybe new sublimits do we have to put into our propositions when it comes to 3D printed structures, robotics, autonomous sites? And also about those serial defects. So we have our traditional serial clauses when the industry used to do, I would say, standard manufacturing. But here, when we talk about large scale and when we talk about a new construction ecosystem, how to integrate the serial defect? Is there a new type of accumulation notion to take into consideration? And we all know that in this case as well, the quality control has a greater importance, and that we should take more care about the quality controls that are being put into place, because this is important when it comes to all those offsite prefabrication. Cyber exposure, as we said before, and there have been many topics about this. This all leads us obviously to new working groups, and we've seen that there are suggestions about modular constructions and 3D printing. And so what we try to do here is just to give just an impulse to raise awareness, and I'm sure that in the new working groups there will be further much more to tell about the issues and about the solutions for 3D printing and modular construction. One thing that we should not, of course, forget is with our friends, the brokers, that we need to have their involvement from the very beginning. And even now, it's moreover the case. It's nowadays, the case, because when we try to put in a new process, we need to help them convince the client and to help get the client on board with the new process that we are proposing. And also risk engineers as well, they need to be up to date. They need to understand the new technologies, the usage and consequences, if this would expose them maybe to a different type of liabilities, or not only liabilities, but what I meant to say here as well is to a different approach about how doing work, about how doing a survey, a remote survey, sitting maybe in their office somewhere in Europe and conducting a digital remote survey in South America. And finally, this is the real conclusion, is that in a world where mobility is constrained, particularly now with the COVID exposure, new processes and remote surveying are a great opportunity for us insurers to demonstrate our capability of adapting to a changing world. And this is important, the message here, because we need to demonstrate, to show to the industry and to show to each other, to work collectively, to go beyond what is currently being done and not be afraid of onboarding new technologies. Now, thank you for listening to me, and of course, I'm happy to answer your questions if you get any, depending on the time as well.
Thank you very much, George. One quick question: when will the working paper be available?
Well, I hope it should be by next week, because of course we wanted to finalize the presentation first, but the working group just needs to be the paper needs to be corrected with some formatting.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't think we've got any questions from the audience. So I propose now to go to thank you again, George.
Thanks.
And I'm looking forward to the actual paper, and there's lots of good risk management stuff there. You know, I always like the risk management side of our industry, and
Yeah, sure.
there's definitely work to do there with these new technologies. What we suggest to do now is, Max,